Hey you. So, I have a question for you. How many women is a majority? A mathematician, or anyone who understands the concept of a numerical majority, would say 51%. But a filmmaker and a film watcher apparently thinks it's 30%. Yes, according to various bits of research, when the number of women in a crowd scene gets to 30%, they are seen as taking over. And that same perception goes for all things involving men and women together. Teams, or panel shows, or, well, pretty much anything at all. And not content with fundamentally bad maths, the next part, the really sad part, is that appearing to have a majority of women in anything made for public consumption, or in positions of authority, or even in public at all, is apparently a bad thing. Even if the numbers mean that they aren't actually in the majority, people don't like it if women are in the apparent majority. But a genuine male majority is apparently just fine. Until very, very recently, no one batted an eyelid when all of the members of a board, a clergy, a government, a film cast, a film crew, a senior leadership team, a medical speciality, or a university faculty were men. As if somehow the teeny tiny appendage with a brain of its own and no sense of responsibility somehow confers some kind of magical power on its possessor. Up until 2023, there were apparently more chief executive officers of Fortune 500 companies called John than there were chief executive officers of Fortune 500 companies who were female. And although that is no longer strictly the case, women still account for fewer than 10% of the people in charge of big businesses. But somehow, for a lot of people, that's okay. Only 25 countries out of 193 have female heads of state. That's 12%. And somehow that's okay. But if women go nuts and ask for genuine equality, accurate representation according to their numbers in the population, the world seems to do its collective pieces. Should a political party, consisting of course of mostly men, decide that they are going to redress the ancient bias, are going to try to even things up by putting in the occasional only female candidate panel for selection in some places, then there is uproar. But hundreds of years of all-male selection panels since the beginning of democracy were just fine. And there are people to this day who can't see the hypocrisy involved in this, who appear to still be in thrall to the supposed magic of the male member. People who wish women would just shut up and go away and stop demanding full rights and representation as human beings. The historical rationale, made mostly of course by men, for the public arena being for men, with women being systematically or even forcibly hidden behind their own front doors, was just that they had separate spheres of influence. They claim that it wasn't anything misogynistic or oppressive or bullying in any way. It was just that a woman's place was in the home. That was her domain. Although how that assertion jibes with the simultaneous supposition of a man being the head of the house and also being king of his own castle and master of all within it is unclear to me. Isn't that the epitome of having your cake and eating it too? Whichever way you cut it, that kind of justification for creating exclusive environments for the people in power and enclosed enclaves for the other, the less powerful group, sounds exactly like the widely derided separate but equal bullshit spouted by proponents of racial apartheid. Only, in the case of institutionalised sexism, with more widespread and enduring support from church and state, and considerably less protest from the rest of the world. And it's still going on, and on, and on. Marginalisation, removal, editing out, silencing of women is the bread and butter of certain groups of men in power in every single country in the world, from America to Afghanistan and everywhere else in between. And they are helped in this by politics, by money, by organised religion, every step of the way. And if it doesn't make you angry, then you need to take a good long hard look in the mirror and acknowledge just what a sexist bigot you secretly, or maybe not so secretly, are. Proponents, or should I call them beneficiaries, of the status quo will go on and on about women self-selecting out of difficult jobs, out of science and technology and politics, completely ignoring the fact that historically the entire system has been weighted against the participation of women in almost every sphere of life outside the role of wife and mother. That laws and customs have routinely prevented access to education, to autonomy, to money, and that even when laws were enacted to lower, but not remove, the barriers to inclusion and participation of women and girls, they still run the gauntlet of abuse, derision, sexualization, marginalization, and prejudice, while simultaneously carrying the burden of bearing and caring for children, for homes, for the sick and the elderly. The game is rigged. It's rigged systematically and very successfully by men, for men, and against women. And anyone who says it isn't is either blind, deluded, or a bare-faced liar. But if somehow you aren't any of these things, and yet, despite being a decent and thinking human being, you still genuinely can't see the problem, then let's just conduct a very simple thought experiment. Let's simply put the status quo shoe on the other foot and ask, why shouldn't we have entirely female corporate bodies, or faculties, or church hierarchies? How about if 90% of the boards of major companies round the world were absolutely run by women? And 88% of all countries had female heads of state? If 93% of Nobel laureates were women, while 100% of major religions were headed by women? With men, always and forever, in subordinate roles? What if 87% of all billionaires were women, and women overall had 68% of all the wealth in the entire world? And if men did 75% of the unpaid labour in the world? And if it would take an estimated 131 years plus before men could expect the gender gap to close and their position in the world to catch up with women's? Would that be okay? Would it be fair? Would it show respect and equality and equity to to the men in these situations who systematically always had less, were seen as less, could do less, were heard less, mattered less, simply because of a simple physical characteristic they acquired by random chance. And if not, why not? Equality, or the lack of it, is everyone's problem, and you are either battling to create equality or you are the barrier that needs tearing down. In this regard, neutrality isn't really an option. Till next time.